If you're a woman trying to rise in any demanding field, law, medicine, finance, the C-suite, the nonprofit world, if you supervise or sponsor anyone, if you've ever sat in on a promotion or a pay decision, or you just love someone who's running on empty, this episode is for you. So here's something every leader says they want: psychological safety. This is the team where people speak up, they admit mistakes, they take smart risks. But you can't have psychological safety without physiological safety, because safety lives in a body. So a brain that's exhausted, stressed, cut off from other people can't do the thinking that psychological safety is supposed to protect. Run all the workshops you want. If your people have no sleep, no margin, no connection, the floor just isn't there. And the people who show you where that floor cracked first are almost always your female employees, because their bodies move through more visible seasons than the workplace ever planned for. Pregnancy, caregiving, menopause, the sleepless stretches in between. Now, the second I say bodies and seasons, the reflex is to hear this as some kind of request to go easy on women, make room for their hormones. This is actually the reverse of that. I'm not asking you to lower the bar or treat a body as a weakness. I'm asking you to stop running your workplace on a fiction, the worker who can stay late, travel on no notice, recover privately, and keep the body out of the room. We call that fiction the standard. We call it merit, and then we call the result objective. But women collide with it first and hardest because their lives hit through those assumptions sooner. So I'm going to use law as my main example in this episode because it's the world I know from the inside. But this repeats everywhere people are paid to think under pressure. Welcome to Leadership Law and Lightwork. I'm Marcia Narine Weldon. And this episode is sponsored by Illuminating Wisdom, where human capacity, law, and responsible AI come together to help high responsibility people think more clearly and lead more sustainably. I am a unicorn. I have loved being a lawyer for over 30 years, and I still practice law. But here's what shapes how I see all of this. I spent 3 decades in employment law, working in-house and at firms, and I was the head of HR for a division of a Fortune 500 company. So I was in the room with the calibration meetings and the promotion debates, and I listened to the standards that women got held to that men didn't. She's too emotional. She's got too much going on. She's not as committed since the baby. And a stunning amount of time it came down to their hormones as if that settled it. I heard it all the time as the lawyer who worked at outside counsel and the HR person in-house. And now I coach high achievers at firms and companies around the world. And here's what I notice. When an organization reaches out to me to coach somebody, it's almost always a woman. Not always, but almost always. Maybe they're more coachable. Or maybe some companies think the problem lives inside her. One guardrail, though, because this can go wrong really easily. When we're talking about women's brains and bodies, there's a real risk of reviving old stereotypes. So let me tell you what I mean. This is not one body, not one story. Some are mothers, some aren't, some can't be, some don't want to be. Some people who don't identify as women go through some of these same transitions. And disability, age, culture, all of these things come in. Biology is just one thread. So the Leadership Lab issue today is about merit. So let's start in law, for example. Women are about 55% of law students and have been about 52% of associates since 2024. As they go up the ladder, only a quarter of equity partners and 1 in 8 managing partners. The pipeline is full, but the top is not. Let's step out of law, and the shape is the same. McKinsey and Lean In have tracked corporate America for 11 years. Women hit a broken rung at the first promotion to manager. Women hold 29% of C-suite roles, and that number hasn't moved. 6 in 10 senior women report frequent burnout against half of the men at their level. Law firm, Fortune 500 hospital, it's the same pipeline, bent at the top. Let's put a number on it because this costs real money. NALP, if you're in the law, puts the cost of replacing one associate at $200,000 to $500,000. In medicine, the AMA says replacing a physician runs to 2 to 3 times her salary, and all in, with lost revenue somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. And replacing a manager anywhere runs from half to twice her annual pay. So a $150,000 leader costs $300,000 to lose. So when a senior woman walks out, you don't lose just the salary. You lose her client relationships, the knowledge she carried, and you pay all of it again to train your competitor's next hire. So here's the cost of people, though, because that's what I really care about. We strip out the things that make resilience possible: sleep, recovery, connection, and then tell women to be more resilient. And I'm not interested in handing women one more app or webinar to survive a system that keeps breaking them. The people who most need to hear this rarely think they're biased. They think they're protecting the client, holding the standard, rewarding excellence. That's exactly why this needs a second look, because bias sounds most respectable when it borrows the language of standards. So here's a tool. When someone is struggling, listen to how your own sentence ends. Same facts, 2 different leaders. A senior associate turns on the big case. One leader says, she's lost her edge. The other one says, we built that case around her being available at 9 o'clock at night, but we don't even know if that's what the case actually needs. Would we say that about a man who had the same issue? A physician moves to a 4-day schedule. She's not serious about her career versus she's one of our highest rated doctors, and we're reading her calendar as a ceiling about her availability as opposed to looking at the outcomes. So notice what's moving here. The biased read interprets her. The fair read tests your own assumption, looks at the work. And if the work's not there, the work's not there. But you've got to test your assumptions. So here's your discipline, and it's also legally safer. Don't single anyone out and ask about their personal life. Judge the work against the same standard you use for anyone and build the flexibility into the role for everyone so no one gets graded on how available they look. This is not special treatment. This is measuring merit by the work instead of by the calendar or by the clock. One catch, though, because this cuts both ways. The moment biology becomes the whole story, you've rebuilt the stereotype. It's one thread. So this brings me to the brief. For the record, I've trained in applied neuroscience and in brain health with a number of experts, including directly with Dr. Sarah McKay, an Oxford-trained neuroscientist, across more than one of her courses. So I'm going to apply some of what I've learned here. And I'm not doing this as a biology lesson. Every piece of it changes how a woman gets read, hired, promoted, fired. So here's a frame I learned from her. Bottom up is the body, the hormones, the sleep, the nervous system. Outside in is the world streaming in through your senses, the workplace, the culture, the people in the room, the phone in your hand. Top down is what your mind does with it. These are the thoughts, the expectations, the stories you carry. And the brain blends all three of these every second in terms of trying to figure out what to do next. Hormones are part of the crowd, never the whole crowd. Now, let's think about something. For decades, what helped us think about medicine was college-age white male. Female bodies were considered too complicated and too messy to study. So it's the exact move that science made that your workplace is making now. The default person is that young, healthy male who's always available, never going through any changes. Medicine is climbing out of that mistake, but most workplaces still aren't. So let me clear out some myths because these are what gets women measured against things during their whole career. Myth number 1, women's brains are wired for emotion and men are for logic. False. As Dr. McKay said, there's no pink laser beam coming down from Venus. Myth number 2, you can tell a woman or a man by the size of the brain. That's not true. Male brains are a little bit larger, but that's typically because of body size. Now, myth number 3, that women are ruled by their hormones, so they're moody, unreliable, not so steady, not enough for the big job. This is the one I heard the most in some of those meetings, some of those cases where I had to defend the companies. It costs promotions. Careful studies that actually verify hormone levels find that cognition holds steady across the entire menstrual cycle. You don't get sharper or duller depending on the week. Then mood. One study tracked men and women every day for 75 days, and there's only tiny shifts, no bigger than the swings that come from stress or a bad night's sleep. The men's moved just as much, sometimes even more. And here's a tell that it's not simple biology. The share of women who report serious PMS runs from about 12% in France to as high as 95% in Iran. Same bodies, wildly different numbers, which means a lot of what we call hormonal is actually cultural or environmental. And some women genuinely are more affected, of course, but the research points to hormone sensitivity, and that's the key. It's just that the brain responds more to ordinary shifts that are biological. Myth number 4 is a big one, that men are just naturally more brilliant. And let's talk about where that gets planted. Researchers asked 5 and 6 years old who's really, really smart and showed them a man and a woman. At 5, every kid raised their hand for the game for the super smart children, boys and girls alike. It didn't really matter. Go back when they're 7, the girls have learned that really, really smart is a boy thing, and they start opting out. The ability didn't differ. The belief got taught, and it gets handed down even by well-meaning adults when we say girls can be good at math too. We've kind of made boys the standard that girls opt into. And the math myth has been tested at scale. A French study showed that boys and girls were equal in math when they came in, but within a few months, the gap started to widen. And because France has a strict school entry cutoff, researchers can compare kids 1 day apart in age and 1 year apart in schooling. It was the schooling, not the age. It isn't biology, it's the classroom. And here's the proof that holds it all together. Nearly 8,000 brain scans across 29 countries ranked by gender equality. In equal countries, men and women's brains looked very similar, almost alike. In the unequal ones, they looked different. The women's brains changed in the countries that loaded more stress and fewer opportunities onto them. So it comes from the world they live in, not their chromosomes. And remember, the honest frame underneath all of this. Measure almost any feature across 1,000 men and 1,000 women, and you get 2 curves that overlap enormously, with most differences relatively small. So let's follow one woman up the ladder. She arrives already carrying that lesson from age 7, that brilliance belongs to someone else. So she works twice as hard to prove that she belongs, and she learns never to give anyone a reason to doubt her. Then, for some women, comes motherhood. And there's one path, not what defines a woman. Her brain goes through a real reorganization, a whole brain transition that some researchers compare to adolescence. This is not damage to the brain. It's streamlining. The brain is pruning and tuning so mom can read another person, that baby, when it comes. The bigger the change, by the way, the stronger the later bond is with the baby. And it's a durable shift years later. And baby brain, the thing that we all joke about, a large 2025 study of 400 parents and non-parents found no objective difference in memory or focus between mothers and women who never had kids. And the forgetfulness people reported was fully explainable by sleep and stress. Her brain is not failing her. The people around her aren't necessarily carrying their share. And here's the strength we don't really talk about. The maternal brain can adapt in ways that sharpen caregiving and reading other people. The workplace sees a commitment risk. The science sees a brain adapting. And the workplace reaction is to stop asking her. They staff around her. They keep her from distractions. We didn't want to burden her. But that's a sentence that has ended careers. This often comes in the caregiving years, running a parent's illness in the invisible hours that nobody in the office ever sees, and then midlife where it gets misread. So one is the transition. It's not a decline. It's a reorganization. When estrogen drops, tiny clusters of cells and neurons, they get hyperexcitable and they narrow the body's temperature comfort zone. And that's the hot flash. Pauline McKay has measured women having more than 15 a day, and about 3/4 of the nighttime ones wake her up, night after night, sometimes for years. It's a domino. Broken sleep knocks down memory, mood, focus. That's the fog. It has a mechanism. And in long-term studies, for most women, it's temporary. Cognition comes back to baseline, and it's definitely not dementia. So it's a cascade. It's not a destiny. Now the other thing, running on a completely separate clock. And nobody tells women this. Aging is not some long slide from your 20s. The fast, raw stuff like processing speed peaks early, but judgment, vocabulary, pattern detection, emotional regulation, the things we call wisdom, peak in your 50s and 60s, and they hold for years, and the brain gets better. So a woman can be wrecked from no sleep and be the sharpest strategic mind in the room in the same year, at the same time. So this rough patch is temporary. The judgment took decades to build, and at this stage, it's peaking, not fading. And firms and companies keep mistaking one for the other and pushing women out as their best decade may be beginning. And one of the things that goes through all of this is isolation. The new mother wakes up at 3 a.m. cut off from her old life. The caregiver doing work that nobody sees. The woman hiding her menopause because she's ashamed of her body. Each one pulls her away from other people right when she needs them the most. And this is the conclusion that Dr. McKay reached after a whole career studying the brain, that above everything else that protects the brain is other people. Loneliness is not a soft thing. The body treats it as a physical threat. It's important for a healthy brain. We've spent decades cataloging everything that supposedly goes wrong with the female brain, the fog, the hormones, the decline, and almost no time on what goes right. The brain that streamlines for connection, the judgment that peaks later, the mind that gets better at reading people every single decade. We keep telling that broken story and we skip all the strengths. So if you only look at what women are losing, you miss the most valuable thing that she's becoming. And using a woman's biology against her has a long track record. In 1873, the United States Supreme Court upheld the denial of a woman's law license because of her timidity and her delicacy. The same language that disqualified her then reads her caregiving or menopause as decline now. Same biology, different politics. Science doesn't choose, we do. A challenged person can learn. A threatened brain just protects itself. So you got to build the floor first, that capacity floor, protected sleep, survivable workload, connection. So now let's turn to the Legal's Blind Spot. Sponsored by Legally Lucid, a business protection platform that helps founders and mission-driven organizations know what to check before they sign, hire, launch, scale, raise money, seek donors, pursue partners, face diligence, or rely on AI. So I told you earlier that I sat in a lot of those rooms, either as defense counsel or in-house counsel or HR. And here's a blind spot that I watched a lot. Sex stereotypes hiding in ordinary performance review language. And it reaches every employer, not just law firms. It starts in sentences that sound neutral. She's less committed. She's got too much going on. She probably doesn't want that promotion. She's really emotional. She's not leadership material right now. Each one carries assumptions about how a woman should behave and how her body should stay out of view. Under Title VII, sex discrimination includes discrimination based because of pregnancy and childbirth, and the Pregnancy Discrimination Act makes that even more explicit. The EEOC recognizes that discrimination based on caregiving related to gender can be an issue. But the sharper question is usually not a crude comment. It's whether the decision was shaped by an assumption. And I want you to watch how it launders itself. The assumption becomes the staffing decision. The staffing decision becomes the missing opportunity. The missing opportunity becomes the weaker business case. And the weaker case becomes the reason she's told she's not ready. And we call that merit. So here's the lens when you're thinking about a decision. Will we use these same words about a man with the same facts? Are we judging the quality of her work or punishing her availability? Are we deciding based on her actual work product or on an assumption about her life that we've never tested? These questions surface the bias before it becomes a record you have to defend in court. Now, by the way, this segment is general legal education, not legal advice. And for a specific situation, please talk to a lawyer in your jurisdiction. Now, before we close, I want to talk to you about something that can help you today. Sleep is the thing that most high achievers cut first and understand the least. So I want you to understand what you're cutting. All day you run your prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead. This is the CEO of your brain, your judgment, your decisions, your self-control. It's the exact thing your company is paying you for and the thing that fatigues. Here's the catch. It only recovers when your activity drops, when you get some sleep. That's when it gets a chance to rest. You skip the sleep, it doesn't get the break, and next day your judgment is running on the part of your brain that never recovered fully. While it's resting, the rest of your brain goes to work. Your hippocampus replays the day, turns into long-term memory, which is how you keep what you've learned. The brain runs kind of like an overnight power wash and clears out the waste that builds up while you're awake. And the emotional weight of the day eases, so you wake up steadier instead of raw. So don't just go to bed earlier, because people don't do that. Your prefrontal cortex won't relax if it thinks it's on guard duty. But I want you to think about writing down everything in the day that's bothering you. When you write it down, what you're worrying about, so you're not on a loop, you actually can fall asleep faster because the brain stops rehearsing what it's afraid to lose. Then do some slow rounds of breathing with a hand on your chest and one on your belly until your body believes it's safe. You're not forcing sleep. You're giving the hardest working part of you the permission just to clock out for a little while. And think about this. What is actually stealing your sleep? Usually it's that email that you allow to land at 11 o'clock at night and your notification goes off, or the meeting you have scheduled at 7 that could be at 8, or the culture that treats rest as something you deserve only after everything gets done. Put your phone in another room, by the way, when you go to sleep at night. It's okay. You can get an old-fashioned alarm clock like other people did before we had mobile phones. Everything that you're building builds on the foundation of your brain and a rested brain. So here's what I want you to think about. Coaching cannot fix a problem when there's a design issue. So work with your people. Also consider a strategy underneath. What are the incentives? What's the promotion track? What is the connection between sleep and rest and the assumptions about who has to be available and when and on what timetable? That's what you need to do to keep your best people. So if you lead a firm, a legal department, a bank, a hospital, a company, a mission-driven organization that wants to keep the people it works so hard to bring in, let's talk. Email me at marcia@illuminatingwisdom.com. And if this helped, share it with one person who really needs it. Now take what you've learned today and let it shape how you choose, how you lead, and how you move through the world. And I'll see you next time.